So Tiff, you're
So
arguing that the Chinese have built their economic miracle on the backs of these 600 or 700 million people from the provinces who came into the factories and who may have been hurt, may have been never were accepted in the cities, certainly because of the hukou system. Is that how you call it? Hukou?
that's
And
right.
so that now they're being cast aside as the Chinese move on to a more sophisticated model, so that this population who helped create the economic miracle are now being shunted aside.
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of the arguments that I do make in my book. And just to bring it up to the present, I should mention that nowhere in my book do I mention COVID-19 or the coronavirus. As I said, my book came out on March 10th, right as all of us, at least in the US, were waking up to the severity of the problem that we faced. So that is not part of the book. Having said that, these themes that I look at in the book have only become, I would argue, more critical. So number one, the transition that they need to move away from export-driven economy to the world, that has to happen now. And COVID-19 really brings that home, as did the 2-year trade war before this. It's become very painfully obvious, I argue, to Chinese leaders that they can't rely on the rest of the world for growth anymore. And therefore, they need to really transform to a much more domestic consumption-driven economy. As I mentioned in the book, as you just pointed out, Bill, I look at some of these legacy policies, particularly the hukou or the household registration policy, but also the dual land policy that makes a distinction between urban and rural land. And I show how those policies are even today, how, first of all, they're still very strong today, even though they date back originally to the 50s under Mao, and they are holding back full participation of migrants and rural people in the economy.
So let me ask you, one of the big questions when I was in Beijing, and I'm sure it still is the legitimacy of the Communist Party. That the Communist Party has a compact with the Chinese people that we will help you develop economically, we'll make you wealthier than you've ever been, and they have, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And China will stand tall in the world, and we will give you pride. This is the Chinese dream that has been promised to these people. So does the COVID-19 in any way challenge the legitimacy of the Communist Party with these group of people that you profiled? Do you think that you feel that there's any risk for the party domestically in how they've responded to this?
Well, I'd point out that, first of all, even before COVID-19, this bargain between the people and the party was really fraying for the migrant workers and the people in rural China. As China has with demographic changes, with higher wages, with automation of the factories, which is a top priority of the Chinese government, there are fewer manufacturing jobs for them. The service jobs that Chinese officials have hoped that they would get are not really, typically are not very high paying or very well skilled. There's, the classic urban job for migrant workers now is motorcycle delivery courier, which is a miserable job, doesn't pay that well, and very dangerous, actually. There's countless accidents every year involving these migrant workers on motorcycles. So I would say that the bargain was already framed in particular for people from the countryside. And I do think that COVID-19 has unfortunately the potential to make it fray even more. And so why is that the case? I think we are already seeing, and some of you that are in China can tell us even better, but it does seem as if there's a bit of a sense of normalcy returning to urban China right now. People are starting to go back to work, or they're white collar workers and they're working from home. But this has not been the case at all with the migrant workers and people in rural China. And actually there's some very interesting research out just last week by the noted scholar Scott Rozelle at Stanford that estimates that just in the first 2 months of the COVID-19 shutdown, migrant workers lost something like $100 billion in wages. And whether or not they'll actually be welcomed back in the cities to the degree that they were before the virus is really, really an open question. And so far, there's signs that they might not be.